Hello friends, welcome to Bhugol Khagol. Today we have with us Shubham Mahto, a geographer and a budding activist. He is trying to spread awareness about the disastrous impacts of mining, especially in Dhanbad town, which is his hometown. And we have recently seen how land subsidence is taking place in Joshimath, and there are so many incidents of pollution and related health effects. We know that air pollution is among the top 5 causes of deaths in India. In light of this, we need to understand the policies and programs that are causing disaster impacts and leading to ill health. So he is doing a pioneering work on that. And today he will be talking about World Climate Imperative, which is going to cover the global scenario, the scene at India, and policies and programs that already exist and possible solutions that could be there to have a better environment around us. So, Shubham.
Hello. So as I hail from a town which is a mining town basically, Dhanbad. It is located in Jharkhand, and it has one of the largest reserves of coal in entire country. So because of mining and related activities, we had to suffer a lot. We had to witness a lot of environmental degradation, retching of land, lush green forests have been destroyed, cleared, and there are many other things we had to suffer out with that. And from there only my inspiration grew about working on preservation of this environment and the pristine nature. And today's my topic is world's climate imperative, which is related to as the humankind has been witnessing various unprecedented catastrophic events which has become very pronounced these days, and one of the sole reason for this is the human actions, the human induced actions. So I'll be speaking on this. I'd like to share lots of insights about this with the global perspective, what's happening in India, and I'll also try to brief you about how this mining has destructed the livelihoods of my town as well. So the world's climate imperative. I'd like to share some examples we have come across, not even in India but in the entire world. Just for example, the 1st January of this 2022, India was celebrating New Year, the arrival of New Year. We were very happy, and in fact in Delhi it was very cold. We were enjoying that weather as well because we have been waiting. This time the winter arrived a bit later comparatively vis-a-vis other years. So, but on the other part of the world, that is especially in the Western Europe, where traditionally the temperature is very nice, the weather and climate is very comfortable over there, but this time in some of the countries with Portugal, United Kingdom and many other Scandinavian countries also, suddenly they started experiencing heat waves. The temperature, the mercury went up to 20 degrees, and that kind of temperature is very abnormal because this type of temperature of 15 degrees, 20 degrees, 11 degrees also they experienced during summer months, but they had to experience it in winter time. But though it came to status quo, it became normal in few days, but still, and there are many others examples also, and many things, many calamities happening around us every now and then. So we really need to, it's high time we really need to look on that and take a serious note, and every individual has to take part on this. And I would like to start with all those recent catastrophic events which occurred, like Australian wildfires, the South Asia floods which happened in Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India's coastal regions and inland regions is also very much vulnerable, like Cyclone Idai and desert bloom of Atacama Desert. Though it is a desert bloom of Atacama, it sounds very nice because desert is blooming, it gives a very positive vibe. But you can understand Atacama is a place where for thousands of years they didn't receive any rain, and all of the sudden they started receiving this rain. It's very surprising. Though tourists have been thronging that place, lots of rush is happening to take a glance of that bloom, but behind that we need to look why did it happen, how it's happening. And it's not something which has occurred naturally, but it's because of the anthropogenic factors, which means it happened because of our actions, the humans actions, our deliberate actions, our negligence, and lots more. We had many increasing intensities of tropical cyclone also, which used to be very seasonal, but their numbers, frequencies, intensities has increased drastically, and it's really a concern. And the aftermath was born even by India also. For example, Amphan, that causes lots of damage, loss of lives, damages to the people residing in Odisha, West Bengal, and other parts. We are also witnessing a record melting of ice in Greenland. I must tell you, the record melting is happening. You can't even imagine how huge this is. Like it, if you can, in simple times, I would like to tell you, a football field. It's very big. Football fields are very big, and you can imagine like 60, 70,000 football fields. Compare that kind of area and put that, superimpose it on Greenland, and imagine such huge area ice has got melted. So you can understand the severity. Apart from that, food is like something we needed for survival. After oxygen, the most vital thing which we need for our survival is food. But what if we have difficulty in not just buying that food, but even if we won't come, if there no production of food is happening, what will happen? So same thing is happening in Eastern Africa, majorly Eastern Africa, because they are experiencing frequent droughts, and that drought is the suffering we just can't explain in words. That East Africa drought. We are familiar with the some South America's dry corridor, but the gradually that area of dry corridor is been expanding, and it's not expanding naturally. Again, I would like to mention it's happening because of the human induced actions, and those actions are very irresponsibly being done. But sometimes what actually offends me, and I get disheartened, is because still there is a perception being made by many capitalists, I can say, and many other sections of the society, and they are saying that these uncertain events is very much natural. We are just giving a hype, that's it, because of our some propaganda, and because of our some needs we are just boasting about it, talking about it. But and you can see also we have very large events taking place this year only, COP27, which happened in Egypt. And if COP is, I would like to mention what the COP is. COP is Conference of the Parties, where various countries from all the world comes, sits, and talks about the future path which can help in mitigating the negative impacts of climate change. Okay, so it happens every year. It started because of the initiatives taken by UNFCCC, that is United Nations Framework for Climate Change. So I'd like to explain you and elaborate more on all these issues. And because as I mentioned also, that some section of the society, some people also, some capitalists also believe that this perception is being spreaded, that climate change is something which is very unreal, but it's real, it's happening. Because you can see IPCC, that is IPCC's report, that is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It comprises of scientists, various environment experts, government agencies, government itself. So that IPCC is accepting that this climate change is happening in real. So these man-induced climate change and related catastrophic activities can be experienced and observed on all the spheres of life, like whether you can observe it in your hydrosphere, cryosphere, biosphere. Okay, and this is not something which is just coming spontaneously from anywhere. These are the well observations of eminent scientists. Okay, and you can see that in their distinctive isotopic fingerprint. Isotopic fingerprint, I mean to say that how they have analyzed, they have done the global thermal mapping, and they came out of this conclusion that how the entire globe is getting warm, and so on and so forth. So I'll come to the Australian wildfires. When I saw the Australian wildfires, because I stay in India and I saw it on various news channels, I saw it on newspapers as well, and the images was very horrifying. The way the animals were running for their life, it was very scaring. Because of course when a disaster takes place, our life is at stake, humans lives are at stake. And because there is a belief that when tsunami occurred, it was a very surprising to hear that the casualty happened mainly to human, but no animals was harmed, because they realized that earthquake is going to happen which will trigger the tsunami, so they moved to interior continental part. But when this Australian wildfires happened, the sufferings was mainly of animals. The kangaroos, we know, they are some who are endemic to that area. They are the Australia is a place where you can commonly find them, and the way they had to struggle was very horrifying. The images which I saw was very horrifying, and of course it happened, and the way it happened, we have lots of evidences that how this happened, and we all know about ocean dipole. And if you don't know, I would like to tell you about this factor. Ocean dipole is a very important factor. It has its role in our Indian monsoon also. It determines how our Indian monsoon would be, and this also determines, Indian ocean dipole also determines how the rainfall will be happening on various other parts which are in and around Indian Ocean. So because of this Indian Ocean dipole, what I'll like to elaborate more on this Indian Ocean dipole is, like, we have two regions of Indian Ocean, that is Eastern Indian Ocean and Western Indian Ocean. So what exactly happens in this Indian Ocean dipole is, there is a two regions which is divided, and divided on the basis of temperature. Like we have, if it's Eastern Indian Ocean, and if that gets warmer, so what happens, the Indian part receives less rainfall. But when the western part of Indian Ocean gets warmer, India receives good amount of rainfall, but Australia experiences severe droughts and very less scanty rainfall. And because of that, what happened, the vegetation was very much dried, and because of dry vegetation, this fire spread like anything. With you can people believe, and studies also shows that it's a deliberate actions, but even if it's not deliberate, the way it spreaded, so it was also because of the Indian Ocean dipole. Now let's come to South Asia floods. South Asia floods, you can see how it has forced millions of people to change their dwelling units. And we are very much attached to the place where we live, and you can imagine how bad it feels when you are forced to take such extreme step of moving your house from one place to another, and that too at a time, at a circumstances where your life is at stake. So same thing happened, and around more than 12-15 lakhs people had to shift their houses because of this floods. And with studies, we came to a conclusion, we got to know that these frequent South Asian floods also happened because of the climate change. We also saw what happened in Pakistan. The entire population, I'm saying it, entire population was somehow got affected because of the South Asian floods in entire Pakistan. And we have already witnessed what has happened to Nepal, Bangladesh during these situations. Now let's come to what other findings we got to know from various journals, reports in the Guardian, journals like in Nature, how the Greenland ice has been melting, and that too at a very faster rate. Faster rate is like, I would like to mention that climate change has already started. It has already destructed enough, and it's very shocking to know that the destruction which is about to happen, it's irrevocable. It will happen.
Yes.
It is inevitable. Okay, and the scientists and the studies also shows that 3.3% land of Greenland will suffer and their ice will melt. And just think if 3.3% of their land is getting melted, so that can rise the ocean level by a foot. So you can imagine if entire Greenland melts, what's gonna happen? How many parts will get submerged? All those island nations will are at brink, no doubt in that. Are at brink.
Even the coastal cities.
Exact, coastal cities like Fiji. Take example of Fiji. Take example Fiji. It's they are really concerned about this. You can see Indonesia. You know about the capital. They are shifting their capital, and they are shifting their capital because the capital is vulnerable to this flooding, and they have envisaged, they have anticipated that because of this rising sea level, because of melting ice, which is happening because of climate change, ultimately induced by human actions. So they know about it, they have anticipated, so they have started shifting their capital.
Yes.
Now I'd like to mention about the heat waves in Europe. I have talked briefly about this during my introduction of this topic, that how Europe is experiencing this heat waves. I'll like to mention about the geographical cause of this thing, heat waves in Europe. What exactly happened? This mainly, the main reason for occurrence of this heat waves is because of heat domes, creation of heat domes. I'd like to mention what this, I'd like to explain what this heat domes means. What happens exactly sometimes? High pressure areas, in high pressure areas, the air sinks. The air sinks, the air gets warmer, and that warmed air gets trapped. And while it gets trapped, eventually it keeps on getting warmer. It keeps on getting warmer. And because of that warmness, the Europe experienced this heat waves because of this heat domes. And it was also mentioned in the Washington Post report about this formation of heat domes, and because of that it led to winter heat waves as well in many parts of the Europe. The East Africa drought. The major reason for the occurrence of East Africa drought, the major geographical reason in geography, when we study about the factors impacting Indian monsoon, so there is one more thing, or there was one more event, that is El Nino. La Nina and El Nino, we all know about that. It is a very common term. We have been studying since class 8 about El Nino and La Nina. So when La Nina occurs, we know it's very good for Indian monsoon. But this El Nino, it's not only bad for India, but it has showed that how worse it can become. Because in East Africa, more than like 1 crore of people had to go through this phase of severe drought, and there was a huge shortage of food because no production was happening
Naturally.
because of this El Nino effect. And this severity of El Nino, the occurrence of El Nino, usually we know it occurs in 5 years, 10 years span, but it got more frequent and more uncertain. And because of this uncertain and frequent events, because of this El Nino, we had this East Africa drought occurred. Because of that, you know about the Abasian Highlands, which comprises of this Somalia, South Sudan, Kenya, Abasian Highlands, they also suffered, and all these countries are suffering still today. Also they are suffering because agriculture is something, is like what you reap today you get after few months. So they had to suffer this drought back in 2021. So again the impact is still visible in 2022. So now let's come to this part. This was more like I took many cases, but this climate change has many other impacts also. And that other impact is, very first is change in landscapes. I don't know many of you know or not, but I'll make you aware with this. For the very first time, we saw a grass growing in Antarctica. For the first time,
Yes.
we saw this grass growing in Antarctica. You can imagine, just a single strand of grass is nothing, but you just imagine when it grows in Antarctica, it's not just nothing, it's really a concern for the entire mankind. The other impacts also involves the change in vegetation, the change in the species which are naturally part of a particular habitat has been changed. Gradually it is happening, but this is also a matter of concern. a risk to the ecosystem. Ocean acidification, we know about this. We know that oceans are huge reservoir of carbon dioxide, and not only that, this gas is also trapped in ices also, and ice also has lot of things trapped in it which we are unaware of that. Suppose you can see what just a small amount of virus COVID did to us. For the 2 years, it made the entire world worried, and the entire world was standstill. Yeah, standstill. The entire world was standstill, and it is also being said by many experts that these frozen areas have lots of viruses in it, and if that start melting, so you can understand what it will cause to the ecosystem. And this ocean acidification, this is also happening because we already have so much carbon in the ocean water, and if more CO2 is released, so we can imagine the threat, we can imagine the impact. Now let's come to the health issues. Health is something which is very, very, very vital for us. Not health, but the well-being state, the healthy state, that is very vital. But that is also being compromised, that is also getting damaged. Just see an example. In 2019, there was a report that 19 million people died just because of pollution. Just because of pollution. And pollution is something, we didn't have this naturally. We didn't have this. It's humans' creation.
Yes.
It's human creations. And not only that, what has been done, but in future also, like WHO, they have also said about this that around 3 lakhs people will be dying every year. 3 lakhs, around 3 lakhs people will be dying every year. And you can imagine, if we will mitigate this impacts of climate change, we can save that 3 lakhs life. It's in our hand.
Yes.
And this can be possible only with our collective effort. Now let's come to the economic impacts. Economy is something with which every individual is related with it. And according to the various stats presented by various organizations, reports, research journals, we got to know about the economic impact of this. For example, $375 billion means climate change can impact or can lead to a loss of $375 million, and that's a huge amount. Huge amount. You can understand that for past couple of years, whenever there used to be a conference of parties, we developing countries are demanding for around $100 billion for a technology transition, but we are unable to get that because some problems from developed nations also. So you can imagine, if we would work on this mitigation of climate change, we are already having this amount, $375 billion. It's a huge amount.
Yes.
So that technological transition can happen with that amount of fund, which we already have. Now let's come to this part, climate change impacts in India. German Watch, about it we know, it's a think tank, non-profit think tank. It has also showed the Indian vulnerabilities, where we lie. And if you can see, it is the 5th most affected country by climate change, and it's not, they are not comparing it in just in Asia, but entire world, because we have a huge physiographic divisions, and because of that also our vulnerability increases. Sometimes that is an advantage, having a various physiographic divisions, but because of that physiographic divisions, because of the vulnerability has also increased. We can see that how the rainfall pattern has not completely, but has changed a lot, especially in eastern part of India. There are many reports which says that the monsoon pattern has mostly changed in eastern part. It's more pronounced, because earlier what used to happen, the eastern part, they are something where their staple food is rice. They produces it a lot.
Yes.
And for production of this, they mainly depend on monsoon water,
yes.
monsoon rain, and the water which they get from monsoon rain. But the study says that instead of monsoon, they are receiving more amount of rain during summer months. So you can imagine, ultimately this will lead to the shortage of rice, and rice shortage means staple food, less availability of staple food for those huge population, and we know crores of people live in that part of India also. This Amphan cyclone, the Chennai floods is completely because of the irresponsible, insensitive actions of humans. Because we got to know that because of those encroached settlements, wetlands was destroyed, over that many apartments, many infrastructure, many construction happened, and the drainage system was also compromised. So because of that, we had to go through this Chennai floods. People had to suffer a lot, and even there was a study which was conducted by IIT Madras. They said it is not something which just happened once. In coming future, the severity is going to increase,
Yes.
and the frequency as well.
Similarly, Mumbai floods.
Mumbai floods also.
Yeah.
So we can clearly see that how this climate change is also impacting India and all corners of India, not only just the regions who are closer to coastal areas, but also the hilly areas, the mountainous areas, even the arid areas. In Rajasthan also, some part started experiencing lots of rainfall, and the flood like situation occurred over there also, because the region is not used to such kind of rainfall.
Yes.
But why this is happening? Because of climate change and human induced actions which has triggered climate change. So now what India has been doing about this, we have very enthusiastically, we are participating in all the global events which is concerned about climate change. So the Indian government also came out with this NAPCC, that is National Action Plan for Climate Change. So there are lots of things we are doing. For example, we have a national solar mission, and not only that, we also created International Solar Alliance and India, which was the combined initiative of India and France. And we really feel very happy that the headquarter of Indian Solar Alliance is also established in India only, that is in Gurugram. So and under the aegis of that organization only, they are only mentoring and helping us out in implementing national solar mission. And we can see that today the amount of energy production of per kilowatt energy what we are producing from coal, so if we will produce that amount of energy, that got more cheaper. So we are slowly transforming and as we have increased in fact our targets of non-renewable energy, we have increased it from 30 gigawatts to 50 gigawatts. We have national mission on sustainable agriculture. Indian government is also planning, working robustly on this sector, national mission on sustainable agriculture, as Indian government has also announced the 2023 as a year of millets.
Yes.
Year of millets.
Yes. It's a year of
because many decades back, millets was a very important part of our diet. But you can see millets, it used to be grown in eastern part also, in western part also, in northern part also.
Yeah.
But now, because of MSP and various other things, the northern parts, instead of growing millets, started growing those crops which traditionally they didn't used to grow. Exactly.
Yeah,
for rice. Yes. Rice is a water intensive crop, and availability of water is comparatively less in northern parts.
In Punjab and Haryana.
Punjab and Haryana. But because of this MSP, they moved on to something, started growing rice, which is not even their staple food also.
But it is a commercially viable, it was a commercially viable food.
Yeah.
Yes.
So under this National Mission on Sustainable Agriculture, they are trying to diversify the growing of crops and want to bring back all those same crops which were not very much water intensive, and it can also fulfill our Poshan Abhiyan. Because millets are very high in fiber, very nutritious, and apart from that, we have National Water Mission also, which is looking into and trying to prevent the pollution which has happened, and the pollution which was done mainly by the human actions. The separate ministry has been created because of that. We have a Namami Ganga mission also, who is looking after rejuvenating that river again. We also came across in COP26, which happened in Glasgow. So Indian government and they announced about life. Life means lifestyle. Lifestyle for environment means our lifestyle has to be according to the environment.
Right.
How we eat, what we eat, how we are disposing things, the waste, how it is being disposed, the things which we are using. We have to, like recently, the government through its executive order eliminated the use of single-use plastics. So they have banned it. So all these are part of only, and when they banned it, so there has to be certain alternative. So that alternative will come out from lifestyle, because earlier a traditional middle class family used to carry jute bags, okay, and they had in rural areas and tribal areas, they had more sustainable ways of carrying food and various other things also. Now the national mission on enhanced energy efficiency also, we are looking forward, like recently government has also passed national hydrogen mission. This is something which is available abundant, but the cost economically it was not viable, but with a proper technology and initiative we can make this economically viable also and technologically feasible also. So when it comes to India's efforts, there are some sector specific efforts also which Indian government, Indian organization are looking into or focusing more on, like modern supercritical coal based thermal power technology. We are trying to revamp that, and we are trying to reduce our reliability on them for the production and generation of electricity. And we are trying to develop more solar parks and many solar installations adjacent to the various canals. And our action plan for cleaning one of the longest river in the world, that is river Ganga, is also very appreciable. So there are many other initiatives and actions which are being taken by Indian government and India to mitigate the impacts of climate change. Now let's come to the efforts taken at the international level to combat climate change. The IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This is something which 1992 which happened, and this creation occurred in the 1992 Earth Summit, that Rio Earth Summit, which happened in. So this is also one of a very landmark steps and initiative taken by the global organizations, and because of a global cooperation. And since then, with the inception of this, after this occurrence of this 1992 Earth Summit, since then we have a trend of conducting every year conference of the parties. For the first time it happened in Berlin, and since then we have many COP which was very vital, and the outcomes was very much visible. So among them, very one important was the Kyoto Protocol, which came out. We got to know that how this Kyoto Protocol was very significant in combating this climate change and its impacts. Then we have another COP which happened in Paris, and which brought many countries at the table and
to sign the Paris Agreement.
Exactly, to sign the Paris Agreement. Though because of it suffered a bit because US withdrew itself from this Paris Agreement. But gradually, after the change in the regime in US, they signed it, and they are again part of this Paris Agreement. And after this Paris Agreement also, and before this also, we came out with a new concept where we call it as a common but differentiated responsibilities, which says that what would be the role of the developing and underdeveloped countries, and what will be the role of developed countries. And then we proceeded and moved further, where the developed countries pledged to provide technological and financial support to the developing countries, so that in their path of development, the development is not compromised. Simultaneously, their development is more sustainable. And out of that also, the UN came out with many 21 sustainable goals also. We call it SDGs. And now during the COP27, which happened in Egypt, so the outcome was that the COP27 came out with a new thing that is known as the Loss and Damage Fund. Like many island nations, countries, they have already suffered because of this climate change. So now they are also demanding the loss and damage fund from the developed countries. So that is very fair. That is a very fair demand, and it is very desirable also. And REDD plus, which is it's a mechanism which has been developed by the parties of the UNFCCC only, means reducing emissions and deforestation and forest degradation, from deforestation and forest degradation. So it is also one of the very vital steps in which we need to look into, because we can see in what is happening in the Amazon forest, what we can see in Western Ghats, how the degradation has happened because we know these two are biological hotspots. There are many thousands of species about which we don't know, both flora and fauna. So we need to preserve them, because we don't want anything to get extinct before knowing them. At least we should know them, and that is still lying unexplored in those biological hotspots. So this can be prevented through this mechanism of REDD plus. United Nations Environmental Program came up with 5 ways that how countries can adapt to climate crisis. So the very first is early warning system. Warning system is very integral and very essential to prevent, to mitigate, and to fight or tackle with any forthcoming disaster or catastrophe. It is very vital. So we are working more on this, we are researching more on this, and we continuously need to developing new technologies which can help us in the system, in the early warning systems. Then we have ecosystem restoration. In this ecosystem restoration, I wanted to mention about the mangroves. We know the vitality, how vital mangroves are for us, not only in absorbing CO2, but in providing a home for many vital species also, which has their own important individual roles in keeping a balance in nature's sustainability and survival. Then we have climate resilient infrastructure. We need to look a lot on this resilient infrastructure. We have this Sendai framework which works. Sendai frameworks gives us an aim and shares us that how we need to build infrastructure which is more resilient to disasters like earthquakes and all, but we need to have resilient infrastructure which is climate friendly, which is more sustainable. Like we are having lots of green cities are coming up, new kind of buildings which looks more like a vertical gardens, where we can do our farming also, vertical farming. So such kind of resilient infrastructure we need to build.
Innovative ideas.
Water supply and security. We all know about the water crisis and how this water crisis can get severe if the problem of climate change is not dealt on time, because already we have a billion of population who can in future suffer because of this water crisis. So we need to work on this as well. And as we know that climate change is something which just not happened in a decade, but it took an entire century, right from the Industrial Revolution 1 to Industrial Revolution 4.0. So when something is happening at such a long span of time, so our planning has to be accordingly, and we need a long-term approach. Our planning has to be a long-term planning. So how this mitigation can happen? This mitigation can happen through the contribution and initiatives by every individual, and at a very minor level, to what we are consuming, to what we are using. Like we have per capita emissions for various countries, where we know that India still has, when we look the per capita average of world, and when we look per capita emission average of India, it is very low. But in future, the way emissions are happening, per capita greenhouse gas emissions can also be very much similar towards what is that global average. So for that we need to work on this. So as we know that the consequences which we have to go through because of this human induced climate change, so the consequences and aftermath are inevitable, but still we can do a lot, and we can do a lot keeping 3 things in mind, that is mitigation, adaptation and conservation. So mitigation is mitigating the impacts. How we can mitigate that impacts, we need to work on that, and we need to adapt lifestyles which are more sustainable and which are more environment friendly. And conservation includes a lot of things, whether it's a forest conservation, environment and ecology conservations, species conservations, wildlife conservations and other areas. So that's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. It's a wonderful presentation, Shubham. I'm so glad you came here today, because in this presentation what I felt was you highlighted the global scenario first, right, where all extreme temperatures or extreme rainfall or unexpected events are taking place, which we think that it is by chance, but it is not by chance. These are the disasters are taking place at higher frequency, intensity and magnitude, right? And since we have larger populations now, definitely, there is uneven distribution of population, but still, at least South Asia has huge amount of population in numbers as well as densities. They are affected in multiple ways. We are already going through many challenges. We are already facing challenges of like basic necessities, like everybody does not have clean drinking water. All the people do not have access to electricity, even now in South Asia and many other countries of the world. And on top of that, we have to think about the climate crisis and try to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions and, abide by the international agreements. So, of course, it is a situation of going towards economic growth and thinking about the environment. It creates a kind of dualism, in policy making and programs. So it's a very critical situation for this generation, because if we do not take the right steps at this point of time, we are definitely going to suffer. We are definitely going to be impacted in ways we can't even imagine. We already lived in jail-like situation during the pandemic, and more such situations may emerge in the future if we do not take cognizance of the climate change and extreme events. Yes, I also liked that you covered various examples from the world and then you came to India. So because we know our country best, then we came to mitigation and adaptation, early warning system. So it's a very comprehensive presentation, and of course I think on each slide we can have long hours of discussions and talks, but this presentation, in a nutshell, it kind of tells about what are the challenges and what could be the possible solutions. So thank you so much for taking out time and putting all the effort for this presentation. Thank you.
Pleasure's all mine.